This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
Hey Scoundrels, Taxus here. Just wanted to let you know that we've got some shirts out on TeePublic now. So they're on sale as of today for the next 3 days. There's 3 designs, and you can go check them out at teepublic.com/user/S-cubed-pod. That's S-cubed-pod with a D. So check them out. If you like them, good. If not, well, sorry. Now back to stuff.
Previously on Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels.
This is Joey Letson from the Animaniacast, and you're listening to Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels.
What makes Star Wars is the special effects, the sound effects, and the music. But there's even more than that. One of the key elements, and that is often overlooked, is the humor.
But the funniest thing I've ever seen Jar Jar do was actually in The Clone Wars. It was Season 4, Episode 4. And the episode was called Shadow Warrior. And in this particular scene, Jar Jar is going face to face with General Grievous, dressed up as Boss Leone. And Jar Jar has to pretend that he is the leader of the Gungans, since Boss Leone, I believe, is wounded and can't appear there for some reason. But there's this whole bit where Jar Jar is trying to adjust his chair, and he's doing this whole cranking thing, making himself go up, 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 and down, and General Grievous is just looking at him.
So, I hear you have decided not to aid our attack on the Naboo.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. We must put end to unfortunate bang-bang conflict.
It was a great effort and cost for me to bring my armies here.
Me so sorry that, boss. Excuse me. Misa was receiving muy bad advice.
Yeah, well, we've got some good news. Despite our previous beliefs, The Clone Wars is still on Netflix. As we previously discussed, subscribers were receiving the notice that The Clone Wars was available until June 7th while watching the series on Netflix. Well, June 7th came and went, and The Clone Wars is still available on the subscription service. So, yeah, that's good news, Dennis. I mean, you know, we didn't really think it was going to go away, right?
No, not at all.
Oh, what a day. I scored all the memorabilia that I could possibly want. Now it's time to head back to the hotel and get ready to go home. Vendor outside the convention hall. Not sure how I missed him before. I guess I'll check it out.
This once belonged to Lando Calrissian himself.
This is Lando's toilet paper?
Yes, sir. This is the Tanabian toilet paper. Guaranteed highest quality performance for any and all little maneuvers or manures. Slightly used.
Fine, I'll take it. How much?
$29.99 plus tax.
I'll give you a quarter.
Sold!
Right. But we can hope. So, next story, and this is kind of breaking news this evening. It won't be on July 4th, but Lucasfilm released a statement on StarWars.com, and pardon me while I get this up, regarding the Han Solo movie. There has been, or will be, a change in the director's chair. It's currently being held by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller.
Yep. What boils down to, you know, we know Star Wars is a talking sport, and we love to speculate about it. And sure, just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater just yet. Just let's, you know, keep calm heads and just, you know, see how things happen and not freak out too bad out there, you know?
Exactly.
Oh, and you and I had the opportunity to individually guest host on Less Than 12 Parsecs.
Senor, we have an incoming holo transmission from El Deniso, Overlord of the Burrito.
Hey, Dennis.
What are you doing?
Nothing.
Come on.
Okay. I was just playing with Tim McMahon.
Sure. Look, stop picking on Tim and get back to our show. We have to continue our Darth Bane summer reading series.
Ooh, yeah, the rule of 2 is next. Besides, I sense the ending credits. Commander Jesus, lay in a course for Dennis and take the wheel, or helm.
Me, Senor Taxus?
Yes, you are my co-pilot after all.
We're mailing it in this episode because we're going to go on vacation. Right, Dennis?
Absolutely. Hey, Scoundrels. Long time, no talk. Taxus and I are back from vacation, and here's what is in store for this week's show. There's a new director for the Han Solo movie. Also, there was plenty of Star Wars news from the D23 Expo. We'll cover all of this and more in this week's news. It's our last show of July, so that means it is time for another edition of Skystalking. Taxus fills us all in on where we can find the Star Wars celebrities next month. The Scoundrels Summer Book Club returns. Jay Krebs is back as we break down Darth Bane, Rule of Two, in this week's Hypothetical. Everyone seems to like Star Wars comedy. We had a few emails to read in response to episode 31 in the latest edition of Silence Fools. So, we're rested and relaxed, but now it's time to talk some Star Wars. Thanks for joining us for episode 33 of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels.
Hey, Dennis.
What's up, Taxus?
Do you think things go better in twos?
Well, in general, two wheels are good for a motorcycle, but not so good for a car.
Mm-hmm. That's a very astute observation. There's so many great examples of couples like 3PO and R2, Vader and Luke, chocolate and peanut butter, legal and pads, beer and more beer, Bonnie and Clyde, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, Othello and Desdemona, Leku, Death and Taxus.
I think you made your point.
Yeah. What do you think is the most important thing a Sith Master can teach an apprentice?
Well, from a Sith perspective, probably the meaning of the Sith Code.
I think the most important training an apprentice can receive from a master is during recess.
Why is that? Physical conditioning?
No.
Lightsaber training? Acrobatics?
Nope. I'll give you a hint. The best training involves Sith-approved playground equipment.
Sith-approved playground equipment. I can only imagine.
How else is an apprentice going to find a path to the dark slide? Bifurcated greetings, Scoundrels. Welcome back to the show that reminds you it takes two to tango, but only one can lead. I'm your dark-sided co-host with a perfect and delicious pair,
Darth Taxus,
coming to you from the Xerox room of my flagship, the Assessor Collector. And with me is the show's co-host and my throat from another zygote, Dennis the Phantom Menace Keithley. Dennis?
You almost left me speechless there. Well, hey, good to talk to you, Taxus. It's been like a month since we talked. Did you have a good vacation?
Yeah, pretty good. Did a whole lot of nothing, but yet, for some reason, feel like I did a lot of stuff, you know?
Yeah,
kind of weird.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, yeah. Spent some time on beaches. Had a nice little cruise. Had a good time. It was relaxing. Nice to kind of get away everything for a while. But hey, just wanted to throw this out there for the Scoundrels. Past guest Tim McMahon, who is the host of Less Than 12 Parsecs,
the fastest Star Wars podcast in the galaxy.
Indeed, was recently on vacation, and you and I took turns guest hosting. Then you created the wrap up for the guest hosting week. So if you haven't had a chance, go check those out. The last episode of that was produced by Taxus and is quite impressive.
Thanks.
So
I appreciate
make sure you check those out. One thing I wanted to ask you about real quick. Have you been watching the Forces of Destiny shorts?
Yeah, I've been watching them. You know, I try to consume all things Star Wars. Yeah.
What do you think of those?
You know, I understand what they're doing. For example, the one with Jyn Erso, right? She's being chased by stormtroopers. Okay. Now, the Jyn Erso of Rogue One would just laid into them all, right? And that's it. But this is a Disney Channel thing, cross marketing, yada yada. So she doesn't kill them all, right? I applaud what they're doing. I like what they're doing. I'm sorry if anybody's gonna kind of pew this stuff, but it's made for a certain audience that I might not be part of. I'm just saying. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've only watched the first three. They just didn't grab me, and that's fine. There's so much Star Wars content out there that not all of it needs to be geared to my tastes and preferences. And that being said, I hope they are hugely successful, and that everyone that's enjoying them continues to do so. I think this is a fantastic way of growing Star Wars for a different audience. Yeah. And whenever we grow Star Wars, we get more Star Wars for everybody. And can't complain about that. One other thing I'd note is that I seen a little bit of resistance out there too, that these things really shouldn't be subject to criticism. But I disagree with that. Any Star Wars content out there, you can look at it with a critical lens. You can look at it with a critical eye. And you are allowed to have an opinion on these, good, bad, or indifferent, if you want them. But anyway,
there's some cool things. I mean, there were some little cool tidbits. I mean, like, for example, there's one with IG-88. He's got this big, like, halberd kind of thing on his back. And if a sentient, assassin droid coming after you isn't scary enough, then he's got a giant axe. I mean, there's some kind of cool little tidbits like that in the story that it fills in a little bit of the background.
Yeah, and I did like the fact that the first two with Rey kind of filled in a not a hole, but just but the between the scenes type of a thing from The Force Awakens. Yeah, and that's cool. And I haven't watched them all yet. I suspect at some point I will take them in. But for me, it was just it occurred to me after, a couple days after that third one that I hadn't actually watched Forces of Destiny. I haven't been real active on Twitter, and I didn't really feel like I needed to go back and watch them. It just wasn't for me. But like I said, that being said, if you're enjoying them, I hope they're fantastic for you, and I hope they do really well because, let's bring Star Wars to the next generation of fans.
Hey, you know what? Keep them coming. Keep doing the good stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, that'll do it for Forces of Destiny. Let's head on over to the news.
Sure.
Okay, well, there's been a ton going on in the news since we last recorded. So with that, Taxus, get us started. What do we have first?
Well, first up, it didn't take long. As we discussed in our last episode, the Han Solo movie lost its directors when Phil Lord and Christopher Miller either departed the project or were fired, depending on who you asked. Within the week, Ron Howard was named as the new director of the film, and filming resumed on July 12th. Currently, it is projected that the filming will continue into September. And yeah, Dennis, last show... we really kind of, had the curse hit us, didn't we? With the whole Ron Howard announcement.
Yeah, but that's we essentially recorded 2 episodes within 4 days. And we had to, we were going on vacation.
Yeah, hurts to miss that one.
Yeah, it hurts to miss that one. Yeah.
You know what? It is what it is. I like this move. I'm glad he's coming aboard. He's a good filmmaker, Academy Award winner for, what was it? A Beautiful Mind. So, this is the... neither have I, but this is the guy that George Lucas wanted to direct the prequels.
Yeah.
So he's got the Lucasfilm ties with Willow. I think it's a fine choice for this movie.
I felt a little weird. Okay. At first, I didn't really think it sounded good, because I thought that we were still in kind of speculation land when people were using his name. And I was like, okay, that's kind of odd. But the more and more I think about it, the more I think it's probably a good choice. It's like a friend of mine said, he doesn't feel like Ron Howard ever does anything that's like really groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but if you've got a good story, you've got a good film, and you need somebody to really make it, keep it good and just bring it home, he's the right dude for the job. I don't know that much about it. I'm just repeating what somebody said to me in their opinion.
Sure.
That's fine. But, that's kind of a good point.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that if all the stories are to be to believe that's come out about this directorial change for the Han Solo movie, it seems like this system that Lucasfilm has is much more collaborative, and they need a director that's going to put forth Lucasfilm's vision for the movie.
Yes.
And Lawrence Kasdan, again, a lot of this is hearsay, but seems to be where there's smoke, there's fire, that Lord and Miller were doing a much more slapstick version of Han Solo. Some people have described it as being akin to Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
Oh, no.
And so that's not what they wanted.
No.
I get the feeling this is always supposed to be a Star Wars movie with a bit more of a comedic flair.
Yeah.
But it sounds like these guys went over the top.
Yeah.
Ron Howard is a guy who knows how to work within a studio system. I think he's obviously more willing to work with Kathleen Kennedy, who's worked with before, and that he'll deliver the movie that they want.
Yeah.
So,
I heard from somewhere, I want to say it was Assembly of Geeks, maybe, that they were saying that Alden Ehrenreich was the one that kind of blew the whistle on it. You know,
I heard that too.
Yeah, said like, hey, they're not doing this character justice. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Again, I like to raise more questions than answers. You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, they Lucasfilm's gotten away from doing a whole lot of behind the scenes, you know, Rinsler type books anymore. I'd love to read the one that goes with Rogue One after what they had to do with all the reshoots for that movie, and this one would be fascinating too to get the story behind it. I don't know that we ever will at this point, but I would love to know what happened.
Sure.
The real story, because I think it seems that the different outlets have kind of taken sides. Some of them have been on Lord Miller's, and others have been on Lucasfilm's and Kathleen Kennedy's. And and one will paint. I haven't really seen a real neutral story on this. Someone's always getting painted to look really bad out of all of it, and I think that's too bad. But I am confident that, as we mentioned last time, that they will put out a quality product when it's all said and done. So, all right. Well, speaking of Ron Howard and the tradition of other Star Wars directors, he's gotten into the spirit of teasing details from the set. Howard teased fans with a tweet of a picture of some costumes in the movie and the message, "Can you guess whose closet this is?" Have you seen this picture?
Yeah. That was pretty impressive. Lots of cape action.
Some colorful clothing going on there. So, where are you putting your money on this one? Whose closet was that?
Oh, it's got to be Lando's. In my opinion.
I think so. Yeah, probably so. I hope it's his. I hope it's not Han's. That doesn't seem to match the character, but Lando's the snappy dresser. So
Han seems like he just likes a lot of browns, black, white, and maybe some muted kind of grays.
So what's up next in the news?
Well, Star Wars Rebels has been nominated for a Primetime Emmy. It received a nomination in the Children's Program category, along with Girl Meets World, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade 90th Celebration, and Once Upon a Sesame Street Christmas, and also School of Rock. And frankly, in my opinion, all those other shows sucked.
Alrighty then, that's blunt. I'm not really familiar with most of those shows other than the parade. I know this seems like an incredibly broad category.
Yeah.
So I think it's got a very good chance of winning. It's a quality show. I'm rooting for it, obviously. I'm biased. So congratulations to Dave Filoni and crew. That's a well-deserved Emmy nomination.
I'm calling out the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade 90th Celebration right now. Sorry. You guys need to step it up.
Right. Okay. Well, Rebels wasn't the only Star Wars programming to receive an Emmy nomination. The Star Wars Show received a nomination in the Outstanding Short Form Variety Series, and Carrie Fisher was nominated for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Comedy Series for her role as Mia on Episode 6 of Catastrophe, which is a series on Amazon Prime. I have no opinions about that appearance because I have no idea what that show is. But I'm biased. I hope she wins.
Sure.
The Star Wars Show, I think, is very deserving. I'm not sure what it's up against, but I try and catch that every week. That seems to be one of the primary vehicles, along with Entertainment Weekly and Vanity Fair, maybe, of releasing Star Wars information when it's not a big convention. So I try and tune in when I can, and I think they put out some quality shows there. So good luck.
I might have been encasing Carbonite for a while, but I didn't realize that YouTube could receive Emmy nominations.
Yeah, I think that's recent. I don't know how recent, how many years they've been doing that, but it's. I know there have been Emmys for online content, but I didn't realize they were part of the primetime Emmys. But you learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a few shows that I'm working on myself on my channel.
I shudder to think
it involves a lot of fields.
Gotcha. All right. Well, as you're going to be able to tell from the next few stories, we are not going to dive into these in depth in our new segment this episode because we simply don't have time and they're all relatively new, but they will be the subject of the hypothetical on our next show. So, but with that, they're timely. So we're going to at least kind of hit them in short form. Sure. So take it away. What do you got?
Well, we would be, derelict in our duties if we didn't mention that the biggest news this week came from the D23 Expo. And let's start with The Last Jedi behind the scenes video. The video features plenty of making of moments from the movie, including scenes from Ahch-To and the Millennium Falcon, Rey with her lightsaber, and more. So, Dennis, you saw this video, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I am more pumped for The Last Jedi from this behind the scenes trailer than I was from the teaser at Celebration. I went through this morning and getting ready for the show and started like breaking this thing down scene by scene, and I gave up because it was just so packed. And we were going to talk about this more, but then it occurred to us that this really needs to be the segment of a hypothetical. Yeah. And we already had one for this episode. Yeah. So I don't know. What was your favorite part? What stood out to you on this?
Well, one of the things that always kind of fascinates me is how come they're constantly rebuilding a Millennium Falcon? You know, can't you just make one and just reuse it? I don't know.
Well, did they make this one from scratch, or did they take the old one apart?
Oh, I guess that's a good question. I
don't know.
Yeah.
I'm speculating there, but yeah, I agree with you. If you know you're going to make a trilogy that movie's going to appear in, you would maybe just take it apart. They're probably using it in Han Solo too. So.
Yeah, I may be just a humble CPA with a master's in business administration, emphasis in finance, and so know little of these things. But it seems like you would want to kind of look at cost save sometimes, kind of maximize your return on your investment. I don't know. Maybe they're making so much money that we'll build 10,000 Falcons. Who can stop us now?
I don't want to get too much into the themes that we saw that were in this behind the scenes featurette, but I will note that one of the things that I thought was pretty cool was, we got to see that casino that they showed in the Vanity, or they were talking about in the Vanity Fair pictures that Annie Leibovitz did, and we had even more aliens that we didn't see that were in that, and some of those were pretty cool.
Well, the little slug one was kind of interesting to me.
And then they had that animatronic dog-looking thing that they put together. That was pretty cool too. So,
who I thought that slug was at first? I thought that was the same species as who is the Colonel in the Droid Arc.
Oh yeah,
that Steven Stan did the voice of.
Yeah, and droids, that D-Squad thing.
Yeah, the D-Squad.
They had in Clone Wars.
Yeah, but it's different.
Gascon or something.
Meebus something or other. Yeah.
Right. Well, okay. Well, moving on, the other big news that came out of, another part of the big news that came out of D23 was Disney and Lucasfilm had plenty to reveal about the Star Wars additions to the Disney parks. Yeah. First, the Imagineers brought out a 50-foot scale model of the new Star Wars addition to Disneyland and Hollywood Studios. Then they revealed the name, which had previously been known as Star Wars Land, is in fact now going to be called Star Wars Galaxy's Edge.
That's cool.
Third, it was confirmed that an interactive Star Wars hotel is being added to Disney World. Okay, first off, what do you think of the name, Galaxy's Edge?
I like it. I like it a lot. Kind of makes it feel like it's familiar yet distant,
Yeah, I like it too. I was afraid they were going to pick a planet name that had a bunch of apostrophes in it, and no one was really going to know how to pronounce it.
Right.
But this thing is being described as an outpost on the edge of wild space. So, hey, that makes sense.
Cool.
Okay, the model. 50 foot long. That thing was incredible. And then they had that video of it with the camera angles going through the model. And at the end, it switched over to kind of a 3D presentation where the characters were walking around.
Yeah.
I am so excited. This thing just keeps I remember we talked about the concept art, and that seemed so pie in the sky. But they've been talking about this model as the blueprint, the reference model for creating this land. And I'm stoked. This thing is just, it's got me salivating to go to this park.
What if they did the model and they were like, oh man, that was tough. Well, that's pretty good. Let's just stop there.
That would be extremely disappointing.
Let's develop the micronization technology we've been working on secretly for the past 40 years.
Right.
After Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Well, and then of course there's the hotel, and apparently this is it's not just a place to go put your luggage while you go to the parks. It is a check-in, and you are now involved in a Star Wars story, complete with new costumes, and you get kind of your own immersive experience, and you can do as much or as little as you want. We talked about this when it was in the rumor stage a couple episodes ago, but I'm kind of surprised it's actually going to be, and it's not going to be cheap. There's been estimates that for like a family of 4 for a weekend, you're talking about $2,500. But
but what a memory,
But it'd be an incredible weekend with the family. That's for certain.
It's great because you don't have to do that to still get a lot out of it, right? I mean, you can still do the regular park area and probably really enjoy yourself. But yeah, that would be a special treat to do the whole thing. But you need to really, I mean, it's almost like you would need almost a week of time there by yourself, just for that.
Well, I think it's a 2-day program that they're setting up for that hotel. I mean, to me, not to brag, but I've been to Disney World quite a few times, and this would be a situation where I think I would book that hotel for the weekend, do that experience exclusively, because it's supposed to be some sort of you're in a starship when you get checked in and settled in. That's cool. And then for the rest of my vacation, I'd go stay someplace else. Right. And you would still get to enjoy Galaxy's Edge and the other parks. Yeah, totally. Yeah, but we'll get more into that next time.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, last up, one final note. Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher were formally inducted as Disney Legends at D23 Expo. So that's really nice. Congratulations to them.
I'm looking forward to seeing more of Mark's acceptance speech. I've seen snippets of it online. It meant a lot to him. He was a big Disney fan. It's kind of become apparent, the D23 is not that, doesn't have that big a history. It's only been, there's been like 4 or 5 of these things. Right. And so, as they've acquired Marvel and now Lucasfilm, they're bringing those entities in, and they're creating kind of a history about what makes all their properties great. And a lot of people have kind of questions like, well, how can Mark and Carrie be Disney legends? They've only been part of the Disney family for a few years. I think it's the wrong way to look at it. I think it is this is the current Disney family, and these people helped contribute something to some branch of that family that made it great. And so that's the way to do it. I know a lot of people were guessing that Harrison Ford might be getting that honor this weekend as well. I can't help it. Disney. Well, I mean, they're making a new Indiana Jones. It would make sense if they kind of inducted him into that. So in the next one, I'm assuming the next one will be in 2019, and they'll do that then.
Well, and this is the first D23 that I know of that's really been chock full of Star Wars news.
Well, they've always kind of had something with, in 2015, they had some of the Force Awakens stuff, and they did mention a little bit, I think, about the parks then, but it was still, by comparison, relatively new that Lucasfilm was part of the Disney family. And now, there's a couple more years behind them as they've really settled it in as part of the overall family. So more opportunities to talk about it. Sure. Well, that's going to do it for our look at the news this week. If you want more on these stories, I would suggest, many fine articles over on RetroZap, and head over to Jedi News. They are always up to date on the current stories, and we will be getting into much more from D23 on episode 34 of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Well, we got plenty of other things to get to this episode, so let's head over to Skystalking.
All right.
Like we're being watched.
I am wondering, why are you here?
I'm looking for someone.
Looking? Found someone you have, I would say.
All right, it's time for another edition of Skystalking. In this segment, Taxus has scoured the internet and figured out where all the Star Wars celebrities are appearing next month. So let us know, Taxus, where can we find everyone?
All right, thanks, Dennis. Well, first up, I have a little appearance at a place called Planet Comics on August the 2nd in Anderson, South Carolina. Charles Soule, a Star Wars comic writer for Lando, Obi-Wan, and currently Vader, will be making an appearance there. That's going to be a nice one. After that, we've got MetroCon on August 3rd to the 6th in Tampa, Florida, appearing as Steve Bloom, and then Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, which they seem to appear a lot together, Dennis.
Yeah, that's a reason for that.
Oh, okay.
Bit of a relationship going on there.
Oh, well, she's Governor Price, and so in Rebels. Christina V, Star Wars video game voice. Max Mittelman, Star Wars video games. Robbie Damon, I apologize. Voices for Rebels and in some video games. And finally, we've got Kyle Rowling, who was the fight choreographer for episodes 2 and 3, and the motion capture model for General Grievous, so that's pretty cool. Okay. After that, we've got Boston Comic-Con, August 11th to 13th in Boston, Massachusetts, which is also affiliated with the fine people at Fan Expo. Appearing there, we've got Alan Tudyk, Drew Struzan,
Wait. That's Plano's own.
Plano's own, Alan Tudyk, and the maybe very stressful exchange with Drew Struzan. Just saying. I mean, it's worth it. But it's scary. Anthony Daniels and Jennifer Hale, voiceover artist, and Tony Harris with Star Wars Comics. And locally, after that, we got Infinicon, which is August 11th through the 13th in Addison, Texas. Derek Arnold, who is the Force Awakens. He's a puppeteer. Did the Lugga Beast. Played Voberdand and Laniver Villicum. Is it Villicum or Villicum?
Your guess is good as mine.
I think it was Chancellor, right?
Yeah.
If I remember. Yeah. And then most recently in Rogue One as Pal, Sakala. Also, Felix Silla is going to be there. He's you may remember him from Return of the Jedi as an Ewok. After that, we've got Otakon. Actually, same weekend, August 11th through 13th in Baltimore, Maryland. We've got Lex Lang, who did some voiceover work for Lego Star Wars. August 18th through 20th, Terrificon in Uncasville, Connecticut. They have a really good website, by the way. I really like it. Jessica Henwick, who played Jess Tester in The Force Awakens. And I didn't realize this, but she's also in Iron Fist and Game of Thrones. It's kind of cool.
You learn something new every day.
That's right. So, and then we've got Neo Comic Con, August 20th in North Olmsted, Ohio. Aaron Archer, who is a Hasbro and Kenner design director, did work including the Star Wars line. That's kind of interesting. And Kevin Nellen did some work with Star Wars comics, of course. We've got Amazing Hawaii Comic Con, August 25th through 27th, Honolulu, Hawaii. We've got Ray Park, Plano's own Alan Tudyk, Matt Nastas, Star Wars artist, and Rick Hoberg with Star Wars Comics. And finally, rounding it all up, we've got Colorado Springs Comic Con, August 25th to the 27th in Colorado Springs, somewhere. I'm not really sure what the state is, but it's Colorado Springs.
It's a mystery.
Might be Iowa. I've got Billy D. Whoa! Yeah. Then we got Juna Suatamo, who's the new Chewie. Paul Springer, Return of the Jedi puppeteer, played Reese. And finally, we've got Spencer Wilding, who is the new Vader and should stay north of the wall. So that's it. You're up to date.
All right. Well, if anyone has an extra ticket to Amazing Hawaii Comic Con and an extra plane ticket, I'd be happy to take it. That sounds like fun. But there it is, Scoundrels. Just a reminder, always check the websites for the conventions in advance to see if there's been any postponements for any of these appearances. If you do meet any of these celebrities, we want to hear about it. So email us at sqpod@retrozap.com. So with that out of the way, let's head into our hypothetical.
Greetings, Scoundrels. This is Jay Krebs from Coffee with Kenobi. You can find my blogs there as well as my review of Star Wars fashion called Core World's Couture. You're listening to Darth Taxus on Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels.
Last month, we began the Scoundrels Summer Book Club with Darth Bane, Path of Destruction, the first novel in the Darth Bane trilogy. This month, the story continues with Rule of Two. Jay Krebs is back to discuss the second novel of the trilogy with us. Jay, welcome back, and how have you been?
Hey, Dennis. Hey, Taxus. I've been great. This is going to be the perfect end to my birthday. I know this isn't going to air for a couple of days yet, but so excited to be talking about this once again here with you guys. So let's get this party started.
Wait a minute, it's your birthday?
They say it's my birthday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I have to give you the customary birthday greeting if y'all would mind holding on for 1 second.
We bake you a birthday cake if you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and whoa. Don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
There, wasn't that nice? That was pretty good, huh?
Yeah. That was awesome.
Well, happy birthday.
You. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Happy birthday. All right. Well, we are getting into Rule of Two, of course, the second book of the Bane trilogy. And real quick, let's get some overall thoughts about this before we dive into the plot. Jay, what did you think?
Well, for me, this book seemed like the second act, obviously, in the trilogy, and it was really Xana focused for me. At least that's one of the big themes that I took away from this. That at this point, of course, Xana is coming of age, both physically, emotionally, and in her Sithly ways. And so she's continuing her training while also being Bane's right hand. And I just loved the evolution of this entire story. And as far as the way that the Force surrounds everything that they did, not only from just the dark side point of view, but one of the very first things, that happens is Bane says, nothing just happens. And he's a true believer in that because of his whole history with everything that had happened to him. And so it was just really cool to see how this evolution took place, and also the way that there were little tidbits of things that you could really tie into where the Republic and the Jedi and the Sith were even 1,000 years later, if you read between the lines.
Right.
So I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought that the entire story was kind of a lesson in parallel growth between the two of the main characters, Bane and Xana, of course. And not only that, it's like each one of them had to learn how to shed their own encumbrances in different ways. And Xana's, we start out, she's still a child. It's right after the Battle of Ruusan, right after the Thought Bomb, and they come across, we're going to find out, still a relative of Xana's, and she does something to save his life. She's still holding on, right? In the same way with the Obralisks. Bane starts to use those as a crutch to a certain extent, and he has to learn, kind of maybe against his will, to let go. And we see it also paralleled as well in the Jedi. The Jedi are still holding on, right? They're driven in the end, we're going to see, by, I think, non-Jedi kind of feelings, and they still have to learn to let go. In a lot of ways, the Sith and Jedi have kind of a similar philosophy in shedding the things that will hold you, you know what I'm saying, back. And I don't know, that's just kind of what the story, I think that's the overall lesson that I took away from it, is just, growth and letting go.
That's an interesting point. I think when it comes to Bane, I might disagree, but we'll get to that later when we get to a specific part of the novel. Sure. But I want to keep it in time. Just a quick overall thought from me. It's interesting. This story has a 10-year jump in time from the first part to the second part. But despite that, I felt like it was a tighter overall story than the first book, Path of Destruction, with a different type of a focus. I think the first novel was mainly about the whole Bane figuring out why the Sith needed to be destroyed, and this novel was what the Sith need to now be going forward. He had an idea about that in the first book, and the second book is now, how do I cement this legacy, and how do I bring up an apprentice that will fulfill this legacy and someday supplant me. And so he's trying to figure out how to be a teacher, where the first book was about destroying the Sith as they were, creating a new order and finding that apprentice. Mm-hmm. So if you're still with us, of course, this is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion if we haven't already blown it away for you already now. But let's dive into the plot. This book begins with Bane and Xana on Ruusan after the detonation of the Thought Bomb and Path of Destruction. Xana is struggling to keep up with Bane as they plod across the fields of destruction. They eventually arrive at the camp of the Brotherhood of Darkness, and Bane kills all but 2 mercenaries that they find looting the camp there. Bane then discovers a Sith manuscript in the tent of Quartus that contains the location of the tomb of Freedon Nod, an ancient Sith Lord. Next, they venture to the cave where the Thought Bomb was detonated by Khan. Zahn interrupts an attack by Daravit, her cousin, that was hiding in the cave, and takes his hand in the process. So I covered several chapters there with that description. And it really, Zahn is 10 years old at this point. Bane has just decided that this is the finest candidate he's found so far for an apprentice, and he is suffering from headaches that he's attributing to the after effects of the thought bomb going off. So what did y'all make of this early part of this novel? We'll start again with you, Jay.
Well, it's so interesting because I love how you said, Taxus, that there's this parallel growth going on. And I think that's a perfect way to put it. Here's Xana. She's 10 years old, and she is all in as far as being his apprentice, wanting to know everything, wanting to drink in everything from Bane. And he starts with very early lessons. Just keeping up with him was a lesson. How do you keep up with him? Your legs are longer, my legs are shorter, figure it out. Those kinds of things. And when they go to the camp and he leaves those two alive, and she questions that, and the one thing that he says to her, as far as why he left them alive, she's very matter-of-fact thinking. There's one point where she says, well, they didn't deserve to live, or they were weak, anything like that. Well, I think it was that she said, then they were weak and they deserve to die. So it's very if then, and that just reminds me of being a childcare teacher. And one of the things that I teach are these developmental theories. And if you know anything about Piaget, she's in what's called the concrete operational stage at that point. Very inductive logic. She's using these general principles to predict later outcomes. And I just feel like, in these very early stages, Bane is not only her teacher, her mentor, but he's also her parent too. In a lot of ways. And I almost struggle to think and have a lot of, what do you want to say? Thought for him, I guess, sympathy for him of raising a teenage Sith daughter. I mean, could you imagine? But it's so funny because he looks into her eyes at one point, and there's a point where he says that he sees this hunger and raw ambition in Xana's eyes. And he reflects on that, and he thinks and he fears that she will actually destroy herself if she doesn't learn to temper and control it, just like Githany. So, these very early stages on are so, strong as far as establishing the rule of two and trying to teach Xana where her place is. He's asking her why she wants power. She comes to the epiphany that finally freedom, the dark side sets us free. These so many little things in this first part that remind me of parenting, not just him teaching an apprentice.
Yeah, and he didn't really teach her a whole bunch of lessons, but they were, I guess, the most germane lessons in Sithism, and we haven't gotten there yet, but when it harkens back, what's that old adage, keep it simple, stupid, the KISS method, And when she's sitting there, she's having kind of a moral dilemma. She goes back to the simple lessons, and she says, well, and in a way that concrete foundation serves her well, to a certain extent. But yeah, it's a good point, Jay.
One of the things I liked was his method of teaching. He learned early on that if he can guide her to the answer and she can figure it out herself, the lesson's going to stick with her quicker. And he introduces her to the Sith code early on and kind of leaves it out there as a way of her puzzling out some of these things. And when it comes to those mercenaries, as you were saying, Jay, she asks, well, why did you let them live? And he kind of leads her through that almost Socratic method of asking her questions back, which is, well, what good is it if we kill everyone who's weaker than us? Because then they would all deserve to die. And we're not in a position where we can take on the galaxy right now. And then he made that very good point, which was, there are going to be rumors about the Sith out there. That's going to be inevitable based on the actions that we're going to take and what we're going to need to do over the years. So the best thing that we can do is help, I'm paraphrasing, of course, is control that narrative. And if we have some of the sources being questionable, no one's going to believe it. Yeah, sure, the story might spread, but it'll become, that's just the tale of these greedy mercenaries that'll say anything to save their skin. And we'll find out later that's exactly what happened.
It seems like a lot of Bane, I guess that's one of the eye-opening things for me in this, is that the Sith philosophy is very pragmatic, isn't it? You know, there's you don't do things just to be evil. You know, you do things for a purpose. You know, and yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly some of the lessons. You know, I'm going to let these people go because they further the long-term goals that we have. And it might not make sense now, but it will in the future.
Right.
Well, and two, you know, with that, as far as being patient is concerned too, I mean, how patient do you have to be to see something like that come to fruition? And so many people say that the Sith are completely selfish, which, you know, selfish, I guess, is a point of view. But you have to look at it from the aspect that Bane himself, I feel like he was selfless in terms of doing the things that he did in order to ensure that the Sith would survive. I mean, the whole key to the rule of two is that he expects Xana to overpower him one day. He expects her to eclipse him and he expects to become expendable at some point. And that's not selfish. I mean, if you want to look at it from that aspect.
And he's pleased when she reminds him of it.
Right. Exactly. And this goes back to the end of the last book when he realized that the Sith and Khan's Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of Darkness, were serving themselves and not the dark side.
Yeah.
The Sith serve and embody the dark side. And therefore, they have to have this chain and they have to eventually become obsolete and have a more powerful apprentice replace them. And he explained that to Xana, which was in the past when there was many Sith, the lesser Sith would team up and defeat their masters, and so they would raise their own status, but at the cost of power. They'd all individually become less powerful. They would then each find their own host of Sith minions and apprentices who would eventually team up on them and eradicate them, and so the Sith power became diluted over generations. And so, to your point earlier, Taxus, about the selflessness, this is where I agree with that, which is that you have to, on the one hand, you have to take the power. That's being selfish. You have to take and control the power. You know, as we've seen in the Star Wars comics, and I think even in this novel, you know, there's one master to embody and the power and to learn everything there is to learn. There's a Sith apprentice whose job it is to crave that power and to someday seize it for themselves.
Yep.
All right, well, let's move on to the next section of the book here, which will, in fact, tie to some of these very things we're talking about. But so they've eliminated the mercenaries, and they've disposed of, well, at least temporarily, Xana's cousin, Daravit, also known as Tomcat. And they've so they're now need to get off the Rusan. Bane instructs Xana that in order to prove her worth as an apprentice, she must make it to Onderon, where they're going to have business. Bane takes the Valken, which is a ship that he took from the Sith Academy, to Duxon, which is a moon, in search of Freedom Nad's tomb. A surviving Jedi, the apprentice of Lord Hoth, interviews the mercenaries that Bane let live and is convinced the Sith Lord survived. Lord Farfalla, the new head of the Jedi Order, won't hear of it and completely discredits these mercenaries.
Yeah.
But he ends up taking on the former apprentice as his new apprentice. Meanwhile, Xana, posing as an orphan, makes it to Onderon aboard a ship she commandeered after posing as an orphan. Again, I'm being redundant there. Bane crashes the Valken on Duxon, but recovers the Sith Holocron of Frida Nod. He rides a Drexel, which is almost like a dragon-like creature, from Duxon and all the way into Onderon, because it sounds kind of bizarre, but Duxon is a moon of Onderon, and their atmospheres intersect at points. And eventually he rides there and arrives just in time to rescue Xana from a pack of Drexel riding smugglers in what would have been an incredibly awesome cinematic scene. One of the key events there, and you made a reference to this earlier, while Bane was exploring the tomb of Freed Nad, he's being plagued by ghosts, and whether they were actually just in his mind or actually some sort of a Sith ghost is a little unclear, but he keeps seeing Cordus and Khan, and there was one other who I can't remember. But then he makes it into the Freedom Knight's temple, and he sees the Holocron sitting there. But to get it, he has to go through this chamber, which is infested with these Obralisks, which are a creature. They have a hard shell. When they attach themselves to a host, they have a way of injecting what is it? I mean, the adrenaline and other chemicals into the body. It accelerates healing, and it makes the host more powerful. But I don't know that they work too well on anybody who doesn't employ the dark side of the Force.
I call it Sithal meth.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
But they feed on the dark side, and so it's just kind of this vicious cycle. They pump you full of all these hormones and adrenaline, and you know, you get angry. You use that anger to fuel the dark side. They feed on the dark side, then pump more of it into you, so you can get more angry, more powerful, and call on the dark side more. And it could be very devastating if you aren't someone as powerful as Darth Bane. So, as a device. For this novel, what do y'all think about the Obralisks?
Well, obviously, you know, it's what makes Bane eventually have to go into hiding too, because he can't really go out into public. I mean, people know who he is already. In some ways, there's legends and things like that, but you know, he could possibly fit in places. But once the Obralisks start to take over his flesh, you know, there's no way that he's going to be able to go out and do things on his own as far as missions and things go. But it's an interesting symbiotic relationship between these Obralisks and Bane, and the way that they feed on his dark side, but yet they pump, like you said, this constant stream of chemicals into him. It makes his senses keener, his reflexes are quicker, and they can even withstand lightsabers, which is incredible. So, you know, Bane kind of enters this love-hate relationship with these things that in some ways they're great, but in other ways he goes over the edge with his emotions too, and he loses his temper. You know, as we see, he trashes the camp at one point when he fails with the holocron, and you know, so it's a very touchy kind of a relationship, so to speak.
Yeah, it's almost like the magic shell of Force stuff, isn't it? Aren't they? You know what I mean?
Shell.
Remember that? Yeah, you pour it on the ice cream and it forms a heart.
My kids love magic shell. Are you kidding? I just bought some the other day.
I love magic shells so much. But so I don't think anybody can truly understand why it does what it does, but that's notwithstanding. You know, yeah, that's a good point. You know, he has to go into hiding. And to me, there's a little lesson in that. You know, it's that the whole machinations in the background and having your apprentice be the one that's kind of the face of what's happening. And we see that mirrored so often, right? I mean, currently in the Darth Maul comic, for example, you know, you've got Palpatine sitting in the background, hiding and plotting and everything, and Maul's kind of his attack dog. Yeah, that's a good point with that. I think that the Obralisks, you know, I think they're kind of a, I don't know, that's kind of a plot device for Bane to kind of learn to trust more on himself than something else. You know what I mean? Because he can, I mean, they almost make him invincible, but he's losing like the tactile dexterity to be able to do what he truly wants to do, which is create the Sith holocron. And
well, okay, there's a lot. Unfortunately, I'm trying to keep this discussion focused on portions of the book, but we kind of come to he puts a lot of trust and then blame on these Obralisks throughout the novel, and you know, and he thinks it's what's holding him back, but it's actually incomplete knowledge at the end that he discovers holding him back, which is why I kind of disagreed with your letting go statement. But again, that's a little bit farther into the discussion here. You know, he sees his initial thought when he hits these Obralisks attach themselves to him, because, you know, he dashes into the chamber and he grabs the holocron. He's trying to keep himself from getting these Obralisks on him at all. He doesn't want them, but two fall from the ceiling and then they attach to him, one on the shoulder, and I can't remember where the other one was. And then, you know, they, over time, they will divide. They kind of reproduce asexually. They just by division, and they cover almost his entire body, which, as you were saying, it makes him essentially impenetrable to lightsabers, except for at the hands and the face. And then they fuel this. They fuel his emotions with all these hormones. He can draw on the dark side more, and he comes to distrust them because he thinks it's going to disrupt his concentration. Yeah. But I guess my question is, even if he did not have these Obralisks, would his relationship or the way he set up this new Sith Order been different? Would he, he's desperate. We're going to find out very soon as because the book's about to make a big time jump here, that he's been obsessed with creating a Sith holocron, and they set up a camp on Umbra, and where they could have they taken a mansion someplace or a cabin or something like that, but they're using tents. They have a camp there. Would that have changed anything if he didn't have these symbiotes, these parasites attached to his body? Would he he is a guy who's already kind of wise in the ways of the galaxy. He was working in the mines on Apatros, and then he was a soldier in the Sith Empire, and then he was taken to the Sith Academy, and then he was on Rusan. He's done all these different things. His apprentice is not. His apprentice doesn't have the experience. So would he have devoted himself to conquering the mysteries of the dark side that he could one day impart on her anyway, and sent her out to take care of all these things? And is the Obralisks now just a convenient way of ensuring that happens?
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good question. Yeah, I wrestle with a lot of what you said, and it's interesting because there's at one point Xana says, "Do I have to wear those Obralisks too?"
Yeah,
like she's almost afraid that she's going to have to do that to become like Bane. But that's a really good question as far as what path would he have taken in the dark side or through the dark side. And I do feel that the Obralisks did to some extent influence his thinking, just because of the chemicals that they were pumping into his body. And they did kind of sidetrack him a little bit too, because he did sort of become obsessed with them. And he even had to build, what was it, sort of like a cage so they wouldn't encase his face.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but then again, he fell into the sense of security. It was almost like a security blanket for him as well, that allowed him to kind of push aside maybe some of his fears and go forward even more. So I don't know. It's a really good question.
That's a great point, Jay. Like, it almost put him in a sense of peace, that he's indestructible. But, what's the tenet of Sithism? Peace is a lie. Right. So, I mean, and they're not necessarily symbiotic. I mean, let's face it, they were put there for a purpose, which is to probably eventually kill whoever stuck into the tomb,
Mm-hmm.
And if not for the cage, then they probably would have done it.
I'm curious. So were they actually put there, or did they just happen to be there and they moved into
that's a good point.
The temple because they sensed the power of that holocron that was there?
That's a good point. Sure.
I was unclear that this was something that Frida Nad had installed there, or if these were just species was native to Duxon. But
what do y'all think about the headache thing and seeing the visions?
Well, I think that was part of the after effects. I mean, of the thought bomb. And, I don't know. I mean, some of it may have been a little bit force induced. I don't know how much of it he was actually, I don't know if I believe that he was actually being visited. I almost feel like it was more of his own psyche speaking to him. But real quickly, I did find the part in the book where it talked about Frida Nad was experimenting with the Obralisks to control their power. So the whole ecology. So I think they were there as a byproduct of the experiments that Frida Nad was doing.
Very good.
Do you think that, so I don't know. I think I agree with you with the headache thing, because it just seems kind of weird that, he's suffering all these headaches and he's still seeing them. And it's kind of one of the reasons why he crashed into, the planet to begin with. I don't know. Again, to me, that just shows kind of the growth. Like, he's still somehow, for some reason, being haunted, by these decisions.
Well, I agree. I think I don't think he knows because he doesn't trust the visions at all, that they are in fact Sith ghosts. He thinks these headaches are created by the thought bomb. I think it's also kind of a manifestation of his own, even after his victory, he has some doubts, and this is kind of a manifestation of those doubts, that it is he's accomplished his goal. He's wiped out the Brotherhood of Darkness. He's now resurrected the Sith Order as he envisioned, an order of two. but what does he do next? Where does he get power? Where does he learn more teaching? And Khan and Cordus and all of them had their doubts and tried to put him down in the previous novel.
Right.
You can't do this. You can't get away with it. This isn't going to work. Yeah. Part of the issue here is that there was the whole Darth Bane comic that preceded these novels that kind of created elements that Karpyshyn had to work into this, and so
okay.
I think he and there was a short story as well that preceded this, so I think he kind of had to try and work some of the stuff in, and I think he did so very well. He made it ambiguous enough that you could come up with your own explanation,
right?
Because he manages to banish all of these, these Sith ghosts, for lack of a better term. Yeah. Once he recovers that holocron, and he realizes that there's now enough. And this I remember actually from the short story. He kind of starts studying that holocron, and he realizes he now has enough dark side power for everything to for himself and for the Obralisks. So let them feed; they aren't going to stop him.
We'd also be remiss if we didn't talk about Xana's growth on her way to...
Yes, I was just turning to that. Okay, so she, as I was saying earlier, Bane says, if you're a truly worthy apprentice, you're going to figure out a way to get to Onderon. And so, kind of shocking for her as a 10-year-old girl. Her existence has been getting pitched out of a shuttle on Rusan, and then spending time with Law, one of the bouncers, having it get killed, and now all of a sudden she's a sent apprentice. And so she doesn't know how to fly a ship, and she somehow got to get to another planet. And so she gets picked up by this pilot and some farmers that live on Rusan.
A rescue and recovery team.
Yeah, that just happened to be with Johan, which was the Jedi apprentice who talked his way into getting to go back to this planet against Farfalla's wishes. And she was tempted at the time to take up this farmer's offer to kind of become part of their family, but she ultimately turns it down.
Because peace is a lie. She went back to the basic teachings. And that's when she decided to make her move. And it was very violent. I think it was even shocking to her when she did it. But I don't know. Do you think she felt remorse?
I think she had that moment of doubt that Bane had in the first book, which was, I used the Force to do these things. When she took her cousin's hand and a bit here, but she overcame it very quickly, and maybe that was Bane's influence.
Yeah, I don't think she had remorse so much as just that, like you said, almost that second guessing in a way. Do I really want to do this? But then I think it all came down crashing on her that she's not going to give up this power. She's not going to give up everything that she's worked for. And this is her ultimate goal, is to be, a Sith, is to be with Bane. And so as tempting as it may have been, I think she was easily able to put it aside, quite honestly. It's almost like when you're on a diet and you kind of want that pizza, but your ultimate goal is something else maybe, so you can bypass that pizza and you're just fine with that.
Funny, I don't understand what you're saying at all right now. Your words do not make sense in my language.
Okay, maybe that was the wrong analogy, but you get the idea.
All right. Well, let's move on. We're now into part 2 of this book, and the story jumps to 10 years in the future. The Jedi are no longer in charge of the galaxy. The Army of Light has been disbanded. Johan has finally given in to Farfalla's desires and has kind of put the whole search for the Sith behind him and become a member of Chancellor Valorum's security detail. Xana is the face of the Sith, as we were just talking about. Bane is infected with the Obralisks to the point that they cover most of his body. Xana sets up a Dune mission on Sereno, in which Separatists would kidnap and kill Chancellor Valorum. Johan, who's again part of the security detail, manages to thwart this attempt. Zana returns to the Sith camp on Ambria right after Bane threw a tantrum in his rage at failing to create another Sith holocron. Zana then returns to Sereno. She gets a lot of traveling at this point, and is brought before Hetton, who is the man in charge of the Separatists there. He turns out to be a dark side Force user. He attempts to convince Zana to overthrow Bane and take him on as her apprentice. Under the false pretenses that this is what they're going to do, they return to Umbria, where Bane defeats Hetton and his assassins. So, so like I said, Zana's now kind of been in the Sith fold for 10 years. She's developed powers of Sith sorcery that are not within Bane's wheelhouse, and he explains that Sith all have different talents and that they all have to kind of develop their own skills along the way. Right. So, Bane is, as we were talking about earlier, has become obsessed with creating these holocrons, and he spends months preparing them. And in this instance, he got to that point where he was going to start transferring over his thoughts, his essence, and everything over, but the Obralisks kind of caused him to lose his cool. Yeah. And he, in a fit of anger, he ends up wrecking the holocron, which leads to this camp being destroyed. So, what stood out to y'all from this part of the book?
Wow, there's so much going on in this part that I'll try to keep it simple, stupid, right? Short and sweet. Right. But we've got the Rusan Reformations going on at this point, which is basically all put together by Tarsus Valorum, the first non-Jedi chancellor in over 4 centuries. That's kind of interesting to point out there, I think. And so from there on out, the High Council is no longer a military force like they were in the past. So, with the Army of Light and that type of thing, they were meant to unify the Republic. And so this is where we kind of get the whole idea of Mace Windu saying, for over 1,000 generations, we've been keepers of the peace, not soldiers. So that kind of, that stood out to me as that kind of set the ball in motion, I guess you could say, for almost the downfall of the Jedi 1,000 years later. Which is kind of crazy if you think about it, but like everything happens for a reason, of course. And so from there, there's so much going on, like you said, with the Obralisks and everything else. And Bane really saw the Jedi as puppets of the bureaucracy of the Republic anyway. He saw their slow demise and the atrophy of the Jedi, even though it took 1,000 years later. And we thought Palpatine was patient. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, it's one of those things where, you gotta give him credit for being a genius in a lot of ways. But yeah, Xana's growth through this, and the one scene that sticks out to me is where she had to train that little reek, I think it was what it was called, to trust her. Yeah. And it took her so long. And then eventually she was able to bring it back to the camp, and he made her kill it and throw it in the stew. Yeah, totally. And all those little things that, he was teaching her throughout that. But yeah, her whole evolution into becoming a Sith sorceress was pretty cool. Yeah. And that scene where she kills Syndra with sorcery was intense. Yeah. And it's interesting that we have a Chiss in this book too. Of course, the first thing you think of is Thrawn, but we're seeing a lot of other things kind of thrown in there. But yeah, and I want to talk more about Hetton too. But Taxus, right. I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I think Xana's development in this is critical. It's like, especially with her relationship with Kel. Are we to believe that this is her first kind of, I guess, lover, you might say? I mean, even though it's not really a lover. Yeah, you know what I mean? First amorous relationship, even despite what her intentions were. Right? Yeah, she had a physical attraction, and she had to kind of overcome that. Yeah, exactly. Right. Which is her part of her growth. It's the little chicken dinosaur thing that she had to eat later. Well,
yeah, exactly. I mean, Kel was her reek, basically. Yes.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. I mean, that's what set her up for being able to dispose of Kel so easily.
Mm-hmm. I love how Bane, I mean, she still didn't quite get the long-term implications of his strategy, with this whole thing. She's like, well, why not let them succeed? Why not let them, do what they want? And he's like, well, if you let this little group succeed, then the Jedi are going to come with all their forces down on this planet, right? It's best to let these little groups kind of pop up here and there, and then just not really let them do much, You kind of root them out that way. You don't let them solidify, and you don't let them basically take our progress and, take us, make us step backwards instead of forwards by doing something stupid, like forming an army and fighting against the Republic, for example.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to create contacts and create influence all across the galaxy, but at the same time, he needs to keep the Republic and the Jedi off their guard.
Yeah,
and keep them chasing after shadows. So they're blinded to the true purpose. I mean, you can have, if they're spending all their time taking down these ridiculous little doomed separatist cells, they'll never see the big picture, what's going on with Sith. Bane's had this disaster now with the Holocron, and like I mentioned earlier, he's failed a number of times, and each time he vows he's going to go further, and Xana manages to plant in his head that the Obralisks are the problem. And she's thinking ahead at this point, which is, one day I'm going to have to beat him. I'm going to have to take him down when I feel like I've got enough power, but I'm going to be at a severe disadvantage if he's still covered by these, these parasites that are impervious to lightsabers. And so she kind of plants that seed of doubt that, maybe, Master, these Obralisks are preventing you from achieving your goals.
You think?
Yeah, well, so, I'm going to go ahead and say it now because I'm about to read the next section of this summary of this next section. But I know you want to talk about Hetton here, Jay. He's beginning to think this too, and so he's now figuring, and this becomes a key plot point. How do I get rid of these things?
Right.
If the Sith are going to survive, I'm going to be defeated at some point, but I have to be able to pass on my knowledge to the Sith that follow, and I really need to be able to create this holocron. So he starts coming up with a plan for that. But let's turn back to Hetton. Jay, what did you want to say about him?
Well, it's interesting. For me, it was really interesting as far as the way that they ingrained Hetton's character into this whole thing, because he actually serves a great purpose in this novel. We see that there were still remnants of the Brotherhood of Darkness out there, even though, the thought bomb was said to have killed them all. Here's Hetton, this Sereno rich kid, basically, whose mom wanted to align with the Brotherhood, but Hetton didn't believe that Khan was on the right track, which is ironic because he had the same sort of thoughts about the Brotherhood of Darkness that Bane did in a lot of ways, because he thought that it was, a democracy of Sith, really. He found that concept to be, it said in the book, repugnant and a perversion of everything that he studied. But yet he was also a direct conflict to Bane, where he had acquired all of these Sith artifacts thinking those would give him power, whereas Bane felt like artifacts and treasures and those types of things, that's unnecessary. The true power lies within. So it's this contradiction, so to speak. But when he convinces Xana to go with him to Tython and become his master, basically, and he gave her that data card to sort of seal the deal, it almost made you wonder at that point which way Xana was going to go. Was she going to try to overthrow Bane and, go with this guy that kind of did sort of have the same kind of feeling as Bane did towards the entire philosophy? But yet he had these shadow assassins too. Again, these were remnants of the Brotherhood of Darkness. And of course, Bane dispatched them all, but that's another story.
Right. Well, they would have done a number on him if it wasn't for the Obralisks.
Right, exactly. But I loved how Xana turned the whole thing around, and basically said, well, if you would have died, then I guess you wouldn't have been worthy.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he was, his first instinct after he defeated Hetton and all those assassins was, she betrayed him. And, she's like, no, calm down, master. I brought you, some information that might be useful to you. And she explained, it's like, I knew you could beat them. And, what if I hadn't? Well, then, you would have deserved to die. You would have been weak and, and not worthy of being the Jedi master. So it was well played. And Bane was like, well, good Lord, she's learning. So,
and not only that too, but she said she had to find some way to eliminate him and his minions to keep our secret. I knew you could do this, Master. I was rooting for you. Rah rah ree.
I know. So just put the saber down. So
yeah, don't kill me.
Just not yet. What do you think about her training as a Sith sorceress? And he's like, look, if you're going to do this, I really can't help you. So there's danger. I feel like that, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but that would be something that would kind of bolster your sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? Your confidence, if you're, because let's face it, that mind trick thing where basically she makes you a quivering lump of jello. She could do that to Bane without the Obralisks. Even with the Obralisks, maybe. I don't know. That's something.
Well, he threatened her. He said, if you try any of your sorceress tricks on me, it'll be the end of you.
Right.
Because he believed he had the power and the force to prevent that from working. And he does, to a large degree. He can defeat a lot of those tricks. But he also suspects at some point he won't be able to stop those tricks. Right. He tells her, I like this aspect of the book because we've seen so many Jedi that have talents in different areas of the Force. Jedi that are skilled with battle meditation, Jedi that are, really confident with their martial arts and the lightsabers, Jedi that can do all kinds of different things. It made sense that the Sith would have practitioners that had different talents as well. So Zana is a smaller being than Bane, and she's going to have to learn how to fight differently, and she learns these other skills, and then her apprentice is going to have to be even more powerful than that, which is a nice touch.
Which is really cool, the way that Bane allows her to do that and actually encourages her to do that, because he's not so selfish, once again, as to think that all future Sith need to be clones of him and they need to think exactly like him and fight exactly like him and be exactly like him. He is, basically celebrating the idea that, yes, all Sith have powers. And I think the more that he learns about the Holocrons and, going to Belia Darzu's temple and getting her holocron and everything like that, and teaching Zana even to fight with shortened versions of a double-bladed lightsaber.
Right.
That just goes to show that he is encompassing more than just a narrow view of the way that things should be as a Sith.
Well, speaking of Belia Darzu, let's move on to the next section because she does feature in that. So it's time to move on with some planning there, and Bane sends Zana to the Jedi Temple archives to see if there's a way to rid himself of the Obralisks. She's going to go in disguise as a Jedi Padawan. Meanwhile, he travels to Tython and the D Corp in the hope of finding guidance on how to construct his own holocron from the fortress of Belia Darzu. There he defeats an army of techno-beasts before retrieving her holocron and learning the final secrets of constructing his own holocron. Johan had been attempting to build a monument on Hoth and the fallen Jedi on Rasan. However, Darafit, a healer at this point, kept sabotaging the progress with all kinds of clever and inventive ways. Johan eventually discovers that Darafit had knowledge of Bane and took him back to Coruscant to meet Farfalla. The inevitable happened, and Darafit runs into Zana while she's there in the archives. She kidnaps him and takes him to Tython in an attempt to heal Bane and remove the infestation. So Bane, he takes this information that they've acquired from Hetton, and he's heading off to Tython to see if he can find out more about the final secrets he knows about creating his own holocron. And Zana has to practice this trick of masking the dark side, masking her presence, so that she can go to the archives and hopefully find what they need to in order to rid Bane of the Obralisks, so he can complete the construction of the holocron. It's at this point, that's all that matters. It's not so much that he's afraid that some days the Obralisks are going to overwhelm him. It's that they're standing in his way of constructing a holocron. Just this single-minded purpose that he has there. So, this wasn't an extremely long section of the book. I would love to have a painting of Bane fighting the Techno Beasts. That scene just sounded incredible. It's spooky too, because it was very. Yeah, I mean, it's all manner of beasts from across the galaxy. There was a bantha, and there was, and then the king of them all was the Rancor that was just, whittled down to bones and technological pieces, and had cannons that could no longer fire. But as he was fighting these hordes and waves of beasts, their larynxes and their voice boxes and everything else were gone, so they weren't making any noises. It was just this eerie fight that he was having, and when I was listening to the audiobook this time around, you could just hear the blaster fire and his lightsaber, and then just some like wind blowing as these monsters tried to make noise, but they couldn't. That was a great scene to imagine.
Yeah, that would have been great on screen too, to see these zombies and just the visualization of them just bumping into, the center portion where they were all being drawn to where the holocron was being kept, and the whole thing, and how the nanospores were still there, and they were being injected into the air, but the Obralisks actually helped Bane to ward them off and not become a techno beast himself.
Yeah.
So, how ironic is that here you've got these beasts that are helping him to be prevented from becoming a beast. So that was a really cool part.
Yeah, one of them breathed it right in his face, and before he even could do anything about it, there was that detail about the Obralisk injecting the hormones and that essentially almost like acid right into his body, and they went, and he could feel those spores burning away in his brain, which is a little it's a little nauseating to think of, but still very cool scene.
This is one of the more horrifying, I guess, aspects that I've seen in a Star Wars story. The I guess the zombification and technologicization, if I made that word up just now, of living beings into just subservient creatures, just destined to roam until literally you're nothing but just bone and metal. It's just really creepy to me to think of it. And in fact, I think he was even somewhat shocked and disgusted kind of towards the whole fight, at the end of the fight, he's kind of like, oh god.
And that whole image of there was a part of the Rancor that was trying to bite on his boot.
Yes.
The rest of it was gone, but you got this trying to get his foot.
Another scene that I'd love to see on film is Zana in the Jedi Archives. She's working so hard to mask her presence, and she's getting frustrated while she's there because she's finding plenty of stuff about parasites and symbiotes and the like, but she can't ask any of the Jedi for help because it would be too direct, and it would potentially tip them off as to what's going on. Especially since these Obralisks are known to feed on the dark side, and she's concentrating on masking her presence, and it slips the one time when she makes a discovery, and she looks around real quick to see if anyone's noticed, and then when she finally she discovers the information she needs. That's when Daravit stumbles upon her, because he's waiting for the Jedi to decide whether they're going to meet with him or not, and so he's just kind of wandering around the Jedi temples, and he winds up in the archive, and she stands up because she discovered what she needs, and then he's like, even though she's disguised, Daravit's like, I know who that is anywhere, just from the back. And so I don't know, that just would have been an incredibly suspenseful scene that I think could have, a brilliant filmmaker could have made incredibly interesting. I don't know how much interesting it is watching someone read something, but just the fact that she has to sneak around and mask her identity while she does it, I think something could be made of that.
Well, yeah, and just being able to see the Jedi Temple in its heyday, I guess you could say too. Not that it didn't have its heyday even 1,000 years later, but yeah, how cute was that when she gave that little fist pump? And then of course, the one person when she lets her guard drop that can know who she is standing right there.
And they're in such a she's in such a panic and a hurry then, not really a panic, but just in a hurry to where she accidentally leaves traces of where she's escaping to. You know, because Farfalla at this point, I think he's given to believe what Johun says, right?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And that little piece of evidence, especially after talking to the droid and the other Jedi in the archives there, kind of made him say, oh no, he might be right. And then the Jedi's thoughts turn from those of balance and peace to kind of revenge, in my opinion.
Perhaps a little bit, but he knows that they just fought this major war to eliminate the Sith, and the job's not done. So, the Sith just invaded the Jedi Temple. So there's something afoot that needs to be dealt with. So they're off to deal with it.
But he didn't tell anybody else except for the ones he knew would join in with his quest.
It's because he didn't have enough evidence. It wasn't so much that he didn't think anyone do anything. They would have needed more evidence, which he didn't have at that point. But he had a history with Johun, so I don't know. You could call it a failing on Farfalla's part, perhaps. Yeah. But if this was someone who didn't have the history with the Army of Light, I would be more inclined to agree with you. He tried to put all that aside, and he was very resistant to believing that there was any Sith out there. It took quite a bit of convincing. He wasn't rushing off on a whim on this one. So, but let's move towards the climax of this book here, and wrap up some of our discussions. But as you just alluded to, Taxus, Zana left some clues behind, and the Jedi end up following Zana to Tython. A duel ensues between the Sith and Jedi. The Sith are victorious, but Bane's lightning is turned against him. Some of the Obralisks are damaged and begin releasing deadly toxins into Bane's system. Zana takes Bane to Umbria and seeks out Caleb, the healer that cured Bane of the poisons and path of destruction. She eventually convinces Caleb to heal Bane, but only on the condition that she contact the Jedi first and turn Bane in. Zana does just that. However, when the Jedi arrive, they find Caleb has been butchered. They are then assaulted by a crazed young man wielding a golden lightsaber, which happens to be Farfalla's. They kill him, and believing that they've destroyed the Sith, return to Coruscant. Zana and Bane then discuss everything that has just happened there. So, just add a bit more detail to this. The danger with removing the Obralisks has always been that if you try to remove them, they're going to dump basically an overdose of these deadly toxins into your system, and you're going to die.
Right.
And then no one knows how to safely remove them. Zana had kind of come across that secret at the in the archives, and we don't know exactly what that trick is. But then as they're wiping out the Jedi, and it wasn't really that close a fight. The Sith dominated that one against what was it? It was 5?
Yeah.
2 against 5.
2 against 5.
Yep.
And then just as they were about to declare total victory, Bane, the Ithorian Jedi, I guess, reaches up and puts a shield around Bane as he's unleashing some force lightning, causing it to bounce back on himself, damaging a couple of the Obralisks. And so now he's into this toxin shock, and they got to do something about it. I think the climax of this book really goes something like 100 pages, because it includes the duel, and then it's the aftermath where Caleb is wise now to Bane and his tricks and has sent his daughter away, so his daughter can't be used against him. And Caleb says, "I have no idea where she is. You can't, you have nothing left to threaten me with. I don't care what happens to me." And then they make this deal that she's going to turn Bane in. So I'm going to let one of you kind of take it from there. What did you make of this deal and Zana's plot to preserve Bane and the Sith?
Taxus, you want to take point on this one first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't think Zana really had a idea what she was doing. I think she was kind of just flying by the seat of her pants, and I think it was only in a certain amount of desperation that she developed this plan, whether, I don't know, force generated or inspired, you might say. And she just knew what she had to do at the time to keep her master alive and keep him, which was her goal, and not necessarily for any love of him, you might say, but just because she keeps saying, "You have more to teach me." That's all. I mean, she's still struggling here. She's been struggling with the whole Derivit thing. He's been telling her, you're not really like this. I know that you're not really like this. But again, in the end, part of her plan involves sacrificing her own family in order to get what she wants, which is her growth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think she expected to be put in this position where she was, the idea is they were going to remove the Obralisks. I didn't think she thought that was going to be under an emergency situation. Right. So, she had nowhere left to turn because she first turned to Derivit, which is like, you got to save him. We have the secrets. And he's like, I can't do this. This is beyond my capabilities. And then it was so she took him to Caleb and thinking that she was going, she had a plan, which was, I'll go make Caleb do it, only to discover that Caleb had taken steps to prevent that very thing from happening. It wasn't going to happen to him again.
Right.
He wasn't himself going to be manipulated by the Sith. So Jay, what did how far do you think she was willing to go? Part of her, the way she played the whole thing out was before the Jedi arrived, she woke up Bane and said, told him what was going on. Mm-hmm. To which point he's like, you've betrayed me, you've betrayed the Sith. And then she kind of let him pass back out and let things play out. And then when he came to again, she explained, I had to make sure you were worth saving. I couldn't let you be weak. What did you think of, and then she gives some reasoning to Bane, which, they discussed. What did you think of all that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that some of what had happened was driven by desperation, that she really didn't know exactly what she was going to do from one step to the next. She couldn't foresee enough to be able to control the events the way that she wanted to. So she really had to improvise. And, whether she was with Derivit or not, of course, she took him with her at first because she thought he could help her. But, essentially she had to rely on, once again, her own cunning, her own wit. She was an excellent problem solver. I mean, that was one of the things that Bane kind of instilled in her from the get-go was you have to figure this out. So I think that she trusted that the Force would guide her in the way that she needed to go and her decisions as far as how she was going to have all of these things play out. I don't think she knew exactly what she was going to do until she had to do it. She was hoping that she could get Bane to recover and like you said, but if he couldn't, then he was going to be weak. But it was just incredibly ingenious the way that she solved the solution, and I never saw it coming that it was going to be the way that it happened at the end, and that she was going to do that to her cousin, which once again just proves that she can let go of that pizza if she needs to.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. And to specifically spell it out for anyone who's listening, she basically unleashes her sorceress powers on Derivit and drives him mad, and basically then puts a lightsaber in his hand. He comes rushing out at the Jedi, fighting off imaginary demons with this lightsaber. He wasn't attacking the Jedi. He was attacking something no one else could see. And, I loved what she explained to Bane was, which was, I had to make sure that you were worth saving. And then he kind of questioned, well, why did you let me live? You could, he begged her when he thought the Jedi were coming, take the saber, kill me. The Sith can still live through you. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to do that. He pleaded with her. And that's when she realized, okay, you are still the master I need. I am not ready to take the mantle of master right now. And, then she says at the end, it's, kind of chilling. It's like, one day I will surpass you and then I will kill you. You will no longer be of any use to me and I will kill you. However, today is not that day. I still need you. And so, and then Bane, he was, and Bane was excited. He definitely approved of it. That's exactly what he wanted out of his apprentice. One other thing I was to say about the notion of the selflessness, I agree that Bane is selfless in that he is putting his all into the legacy of the Sith and serving the dark side. However, when it came to the Obralisks, he learned on Tython when he recovered what's her name's Elia Darzu's holocron. He learned that his failure was a result of a missing part to the holocron, the capstone. The capstone is what kept everything together.
Right.
And he still could have done it if he had the Obralisks. And he had second thoughts about removing them. in the end, that became moot because two of them had erupted and started killing him. So he had no choice but to remove them. So anyways, that's what I've been alluding to this entire time. I just wanted to make sure I wrapped that part of it up.
Speaking of the Obralisks, I mean, just looking, it's my opinion that if he didn't have those on him, the Jedi would have made short work of him. Because I feel like they were outclassed and outmatched. I mean, let's think of it from a practical standpoint that if the only training you're getting is training someone whose skill sets are less than yours, you're not really pushing yourself. And the Jedi have the luxury of having people like a full order of other people, right? Other beings that they can train and test against. Not the Sith, not in this instance. And I just think that there were multiple times to where they scored strikes on him that probably would have ended him, It's
an interesting what if, Taxus, because if he didn't have the Obralisks on him, is he employing a different fighting style?
Right.
They are talking about the setup to that duel with the Jedi, and Zana was all calm and she was looking inwards and she was preparing her Sith sorcery and she was thinking ahead to this battle. By comparison, Bane was, they described him as stalking back and forth, pumping himself up with those chemicals and prowling like a predator, like a panther.
Right.
And so, there's that part of it. But then would this whole thing have turned out the way it did at all? I mean, because, I'm not sure that they would even had that encounter, because if he didn't have the Obralisks, Zana had no reason to be in the Jedi archives at that time for Derevit to even discover her.
That's a good point.
So it is an interesting what if. I don't know. Perhaps he would have employed a different style. He was counting on his sabers to save him. So I agree. Just a blunt wade into the fight, he would have gotten. Right. He would have lost a hand. He would have taken blows to the chest. He would have been gone. But I don't. I think he was counting on those as part of his technique.
It's almost like that Jedi that the battle meditation one just received knowledge through the Force just a little too late about how to defeat him,
right,
with throwing the shield around him. But yeah, neither here nor there. That's an interesting point, Tess.
All right, well, do we have any final thoughts before we turn into some listener reactions?
Well, for me, like I said, this was such a journey because it was, again, I think it was very Xana focused in a lot of ways. But yet it was like Taxus said, it's a very parallel growth type of a journey. And, again, I feel like I have a lot more respect for Xana as a Sith, as an apprentice, the way that she grew in her problem solving skills. I mean, even just the way that, at the very end, when she sent out the message, she told Bane, I told them you were here. But in reality, the message read, a Sith Lord still lives. He killed 5 Jedi on Tython. He is now in Ambria under the care of a healer named Khalib. He is badly injured and helpless. And then they show up, and who do they think the Sith is? Not Bane.
Nope, right. Nope, yep.
So, it just goes to show the evolution that she's come to as far as where she started when she was 10 years old and what Bane's role in this was. And it truly is. I mean, the rule of 2 really solidifies itself in this novel.
Yeah, I think that this is just both of them coming into their own as master and apprentice. I mean, Bane is still learning. He's still trying to figure things out. But his curve is way above Xana's, right? And they both need each other. It's interesting because it's like almost a bond of trust through mistrust, because every time he starts to mistrust her, she says, no, I you have to trust me because my goal is to eventually kill you.
Right.
He's like, oh yeah. Okay. It's interesting. It's a weird dichotomy almost, but yeah.
Right. Well, I like this book as relating to my introductory comments, which was, if the first book was about Bane figuring out how to reestablish a rule of two, this book was how that rule of two was going to work and getting his apprentice to fall into the, she already was believing what Bane was selling, but then I think the understanding is what came along by the end of the book, which is, I can't just take the power because you're injured. I need to know. I need to learn. And if I do you in now or allow you to fall, then, it doesn't do the Sith any good.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, let's turn here to some listener reactions. First from Facebook, we have Michael Piro. I'm not sure you pronounce the last name, but he says that he's read this book. It was a long time ago with the entire trilogy in this galaxy, but remember that it was a really good book. I remember thinking about how creative it was for the author to have those things that stick to Bane, talking about the Obralisks, both help him and hinder him, something that I had not seen in any Star Wars book up to this point. I also like Bane's apprentice, Zana. I found her kind of attractive, and she definitely uses that to her advantage in the last two books of the trilogy. All in all, it's a great series that has a fantastic ending that I won't spoil for you. Well, we've read it, so. But it gets 2 thumbs up enthusiastically from me. So that, again, that's Michael Pyro. Right. So
keep on burning with those opinions, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. All right. And then from email, we have up first Amy Wishman, and she says, she wrote to us last time too, says, greetings, Scoundrels. I finished Rule of Two earlier this week, but didn't have a chance to email until now. I hope it's not too late. Indeed, it was not. This book had a bit of a slow start for me, and I was concerned at first that it was going to get so dark that I wouldn't be able to continue reading it. I'm a super sensitive wimp about violence. Well, congratulations, Amy, you made it. I thought that Carpishian did a good job at getting to the dark nature of the Sith without going completely too far. And I really, really like Zana. Even though she did some terrible things and her lust for power is not something I can identify with, I found her an engaging character. The manipulation and maneuvering was so reminiscent of Palpatine and also reminded me of Game of Thrones. I would be so emotionally exhausting and mentally draining to always be on your guard against everyone. It makes my passive-aggressive family seem like a piece of cake. Thanks again for the Summer Book Club. I'm looking forward to Dynasty of Evil. May the Force be with you, Amy Wishman Nayland. So, I like her comments about Bane and Zana's maneuverings reminding her of Palpatine. I guess that's part of the training, part of the legacy. It got passed down generation to generation.
The patience, like I was saying earlier, and just being able to see far enough into the future that you're able to further your own machinations, I guess you could say, while still being able to hang back at the same time. And, again, Zana really, as far as being the one to crave the power, she continued the craving the entire book through this one. With everything that happened, there was a little bit more that happened that kind of kept her on the path where she continued to crave that power, and one day it will be mine, and one day I will have this. And so
continue the legacy, as it were. All right.
They were kind of passive aggressive towards each other sometimes, though, too. So well, with the two of them.
That's true, but that's a given, I think, for the set. They have to be.
Absolutely.
All right, and our final email is from Sophie Lawrence, and she says, this was such a great book. Carpishian does an amazing job at making Bane and Zana relatable and engaging, despite the fact that we know the pair of them are completely evil. It was interesting to see a Sith apprentice get trained from scratch under the Rule of Two. It created a fascinating dynamic between the pair of them, knowing that under the Rule of Two, Zana will ultimately end up challenging Bane for his position when she decides she has nothing more to learn from him. I obviously love the fact that we get such a strong female villain in the form of Zana, and her Sith magic was a fascinating new aspect of Sith lore to learn about. Plus, I can't talk about this book and not mention the stunning showdown on Tython at the end. It was hands down my favorite lightsaber duel to date, and that's counting both canon and legends. Wow. It really was that good, and for me, highlighted how dangerous the Sith are and what a deadly combination Bane and Zana made. Love this book, Sophie. I really liked the comments that she made about the lightsaber duel, and now that I'm thinking about it, we haven't seen anything like that. We were just talking about Bane's technique there, wading right into the middle of battle. Devil may care about whether they land any blows or not, because they're not going to do any good. In the meantime, Zana was in her corner, creating that impenetrable wall by spinning her saber around, deflecting blows redirecting blows rather than trying to absorb them.
Yeah.
In the meantime, looking for that opportunity to employ her sorceress powers. So that's a good point. That's it was a unique duel for Star Wars.
Yeah, and I like
and having Warrer, the Ithorian, doing the battle meditation and basically helping to augment the rest of their skills. It's funny, we were talking about Twilight before we started, and it reminds me of the very last Twilight movie, where anyone that knows about Twilight, don't be hating on me if you don't like it, but Bella basically puts up a wall around the rest of her family to protect them against the Volturi who are attacking, and that kind of reminded me of that too. And I couldn't help but think about Robot Chicken. 4 throats, very powerful. If you've ever seen that one. But I love how it was mentioned in that email about being able to see and experience a Sith apprentice being trained from scratch. Because we kind of get that a little bit with Darth Vader and Palpatine in books like Dark Lord and Lords of the Sith.
Yeah.
But it's true. You never really get to see it from scratch. So that was a really good point.
Yeah, also Scoundrels, I'd like to make sure to go on record that was Dennis and Jay geeking out about Twilight before we started. I'm just throwing that out there.
Nice try.
My fandom goes in all directions, Taxus.
We welcome fans of all stripes here. Right. I guess the other thing is that we are now starting to get in the volume 2 of the Darth Vader comic. We're starting to see Vader's early days,
right,
and how he's getting trained. But for its time, we had hints of Vader being trained and whatnot, but we didn't kind of get the indoctrination into the Sith that we got here with all these lessons coming. So that was one of the best parts of this book, in my opinion.
May I also mention that Sophie was very gracious in helping us out with as portraying the voice of Rey in our fill-in on Less Than 12 Parsecs, and she and her husband have a podcast across the pond called Bright Tree Radio, so everybody should check that out too.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah, she did a good job with that.
Yeah, she did. She was awesome.
Ray.
All right. Well, I think that will do it then for our discussion of Rule of 2. We'll, of course, get to the final book in the trilogy, which is Dynasty of Evil, in a month or so time. And so pay attention to our Twitter feed, and we'll let you know exactly when that's going to happen. So, Jay, thanks again for joining us on this one. You want to let everyone know what you've been up to recently and where they can find you?
Well, thank you again for having me back, guys. This is always just so much fun for me to talk about and have this platform to be able to do this. The easiest way to find me is on Twitter, and I am at Joyce Krebs, JoyceKrebs, but please call me Jay. And you can also find my blogs on Coffee with Kenobi. I actually have one dropping on the 18th, which I believe the same day that this is going to be coming out as well. So you can get a double dose of me if you want to. And if you'd like to reach me on my email there at Coffee with Kenobi, it's JAYK at coffeewithkenobi.com. So, yeah.
And you
I had to think about that for a second.
Yeah, and you recently co-hosted on Coffee with Kenobi, didn't you?
I did, yes. Not too long ago. We had a great Forces of Destiny discussion, so that was a lot of fun.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thanks again, and Scoundrels, be on the lookout for part 3 of our book club coming up next month.
That's right. I'm going to go get some pizza. I'll be right back.
It's time for
Silence Fools!
Okay, well, we got a little bit of feedback on our best comedic moments in Star Wars. Segment that we did back in episode 31. And we lead things off with our friend Hassan Scarborough, who never lets us down. He says, "Hello guys, here's some of my favorite funny moments from the Star Wars saga, and as always keep up the S-cubed goodness going."
All right.
First, from Return of the Sith, the scene when Anakin and Obi-Wan were preparing to duel Count Dooku on Grievous' ship, Palpatine said, "He's a Sith Lord," and Obi-Wan said, "Chancellor, Sith Lords are a speciality." Number 2, from The Force Awakens, the scene where Han, Finn, Rey, and BB-8 enter Maz's castle. Man says, "Han Solo," and everyone turned around. Then, without missing a beat, Han says, "Hey, Maz."
Hey, Maz.
Yeah. Number 3, from The Empire Strikes Back, the scene when the Falcon escapes into hyperspace. Darth Vader looks out to the view screen took a take and strode off while Piet and the technician looked on with a sigh of relief. Yeah. Doing that movie, that's got to be very stressful. From Rogue One. This is number 4. The scene when one of Saw's people put a bag over Chirrut's head and his shirt says, "Hey, I'm already blind." Are you kidding? Yeah. Are you kidding me? I'm blind.
That was funny.
Number 5, from Return of the Jedi, the scene when Salacious Crumb was pulling out one of C-3PO's eyes, R2-D2 zapped him, and Salacious flew a few feet up and then starts talking smack to R2. Yeah, it's hanging from the rafter there.
Yeah.
But so that's again from our buddy Hassan Scarborough. So thanks again, Hassan.
That's cool. I love that first line too. The Sith Lords are our speciality, because you're talking to the biggest one.
Yeah,
when he says that, everybody's
no
like,
idea.
"Oh, wah, wah."
All right. Well, this next email is from someone called Jay Krebs.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah. Anyways, she says, "Hey, Dennis and Taxus, love show number 31. We're all fine here with Joey Ludson. The Star Wars saga does indeed have plenty of comical moments. Here are just a few of mine in no particular order to add to your list. Please keep in mind at times I have a strangely warped sense of humor. Enjoy at your own risk. Number 1, his hands up Jedi for Revenge of the Sith. The battle droids in pursuit of Anakin find him holding onto the ledge of an elevator shaft. Putting his hands up would cause him to fall. Number 2, yes, but he was an unarmed prisoner. I should have done that. Okay. Also, Revenge of the Sith. Anakin tells Sidious why killing Dooku wasn't the Jedi way. In fact, at that point, Dooku literally was unarmed. Well, so unintended comedy on that one, but good point.
Yeah, they caught him red-handed.
Yeah. Number 3, you're going to die here, convenient.
Yeah,
Return of the Jedi. That's Han's conversation with Luke on Jabba's skiff. Number 4, laugh it up, Fuzzball from The Empire Strikes Back. Classic scene. I think it's the only time we actually hear Chewbacca laugh. It brings back memories of when my boys were little, and we watched that scene over and over because it made them giggle.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. Number 5, Yoda force chucking the Imperial Guards in Revenge of the Sith. I laugh at this every time. Yeah, he just wanders in and boom.
It's so Kung Fu Master. Right.
It's the thing is about that scene I like is that who's looking below their knees for someone walking into that room, and he just kind of wanders in there, and they're like, oh
wait, and they take one step, and that's it.
And bam, he throws them up against the wall. So Anakin's WTF look in Attack of the Clones. After Padme and Anakin kiss, she says, "I should have done that." And there's this moment where Anakin just looks off in the distance.
It's like, was it something I ate?
Like, wait, what just
shouldn't have had
here?
the extra onions on that pizza.
Yep. Number 7, Empire Day from Rebels. This reminds me of a combination of Robot Chicken and the Double Rainbow guy. Whoa, the colors. Yeah. Something. And then she says,
a triple rainbow.
Indeed. She says, keep up the great work, great content, and awesome episodes, guys. May the force be with you, Jay Krebs. So thanks, Jay, and thanks again for helping us out with this episode in our summer book club so far.
Well, that Jay Krebs.
Yeah, that Jay Krebs.
Okay.
Playing around there. Yeah. So that'll do it for Silence Fools. And as always, we want to hear from you, scoundrels. You can reach us at sqpod@retrozap.com. Well, it certainly was fun talking more Darth Bane with Jay this week.
You can say that again.
It was, never mind. Anyway, Scoundrels, thank you for listening and your support. If you've enjoyed the show, this has been Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels, and we would love a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, especially iTunes, which is also now known as Apple Podcasts. If you didn't care for this, then we request you just let us flow away with the rest of the garbage. In all seriousness, we appreciate it anytime you share our show posts on Twitter and Facebook. Please let others know you're listening. Thanks to our dedicated listeners that take the time to share our shows with others. It does help us grow. We can be found on social media. Starship, Sabers, and Scoundrels can be followed on Twitter at SQPod and like on Facebook, where we are facebook.com/SQPod. If you want to follow Darth Taxus on Twitter, he is at Darth Taxus, and I can be followed at DJKVER2. And make sure you check out the RetroZap Facebook group while you're there. In addition to social media, you can reach us by email at sqpod@retrozap.com. We would love to hear your thoughts and reactions to Darth Bane and what's going on at D23. Have anything else that's on your mind? Well, Star Wars rather than not, we want to hear from you. Just let us know. The best emails, which is almost all the emails, end up in Silence Fools. Again, that email address is sqpod@retrozap.com.
Oh, deja vu. As always, we are honored to be part of RetroZap.com's podcast network. Please check out RetroZap for other great shows, including the Animanicast, the Argcast, Beltway Banthas, Brews and Blasters, the Deucecast Movie Show, Dunecast, Kanata's Castle, Skywalking Through Neverland, The Sandcrawler, Techno Retro Dads, We Know Nothing, which starting back up again now with Game of Thrones. So, also, a special welcome to RetroZap to the Dork Lair with Bill Dranowski, formerly of the Trade Federation, and Brian Fontaine. Dork Lair covers the Star Wars SH Figure Arts action figures.
And thanks to Aaron Lay for our show logos, and to James Volpe, the Sky Geek, for the good, the bad, and the ugly show logo.
Yeah. Which, special little note, Dennis, we failed to mention that this Tuesday, as this show's dropping, we might have some Scoundrels-specific T-shirts on our TeePublic site. And very special thanks to James Volpe for helping me get that all set up, and features some of his art as well as the art of Aaron Lee and Magnificent Art. So thank you, Sharon, for helping out. But additionally, a very special thanks to the Scoundrels players and the Because I Say So Street Unpaid Child Actors Group.
And here's our disclaimer. Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrel is not endorsed, affiliated with, or sponsored by Lucasfilm Limited and or Disney. This show is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All characters, music, and sounds are the intellectual property of the respective copyright holders. All else is the intellectual property of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels unless otherwise indicated. So, big show this week. Got any final thoughts, Taxus?
Yeah, I just hope the Scoundrels take the rule of 2 to heart and become bi-curious like I did.
Okay, then. Well, that'll do it for episode 33 of Starship, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Always, thanks for listening and joining us this week. We'll catch up with you next time, and may the Force be with you.
Oh, hello, it is I, the Count. Yes, they call me the Count because I love counting things. 1, 2,